I'd like to take a few minutes and talk about what I call life after your MAcc course. In other words, what are your next steps after you've completed your applicable Master of Accounting course? One of the major objectives of our Cabrini University Master of Accounting program is to provide students with the necessary knowledge, tools, techniques, and practices to prepare for the uniform CPA exam. Now, I do believe that most of our graduate students in the graduate master's program know that the CPA exam consists of 4 major parts. As part of our curriculum, we've developed 5 courses that help prepare a student for the 4 major sections of the CPA exam. Now, our MAcc 510 and 520 courses help prepare our students for the financial and accounting reporting section of the exam. Our MAcc 530 course helps prepare our students for the business environment concepts portion of the exam. The MAcc 540 course that we offer helps prepare students for the auditing and attestation section of the exam, and our MAcc 570 course helps prepare students for what we call the regulations portion of the exam. These courses are designed for maximum effectiveness. If the student takes a portion of the exam that was applicable to the course they just took. Unfortunately, some students believe that they will automatically retain all the course materials, techniques, and practices to be able to take the applicable portion of the exam at a later date, and many times much later date. The problem is that the subject matter that we learned, or that you learned in your MAcc course, begins to atrophy over time, and it atrophies without constant practice of the subject matter. Students feel that they can stop practicing and can get up to speed again by simply cramming for the exam right before the exam. But the cramming technique works for traditional college courses where the scope of the subject matter is usually pretty narrow. However, the cramming technique is normally quite unsuccessful on the CPA exam because each exam section requires such a very broad knowledge of the subject matter. The real key to success is to retain the information that you've learned within your course and also continue to improve on the information from your course by keeping on practicing. Okay, the first thing you've got to do as a student after completing your course is to set an exam date. That exam date then will become the basis for your commitment to prepare and sit for the exam. In other words, setting the exam date makes it real. Without such a commitment, students tend to float and just keep putting the date off. And students put it many times, they put it off indefinitely because there's no solid commitment to taking the exam. Another thing is that students also have to be cognizant that the exam date is a function of their application process. And the application process is fairly complex and it can take some time and coordination. Typically, the application process will take between 1 to 2 months. And of course, if you have to go through the application process before you can sit for the exam, it's a major factor in setting your final exam date. So you need to plan for this. Let's take a few minutes and talk about the CPA exam application process. But even before we start talking about the application process, I want to call your attention to what I would consider to be probably the most useful and complete document regarding the CPA exam, and it's called the CPA Candidate Bulletin. It's a fairly lengthy document, but it has a lot of information in it for the CPA candidates and also about the exam and about interpreting scores and so forth. I would highly recommend that you download this document and have it for a reference source. I wouldn't print it out because it's a lot of paper. It's a pretty lengthy document, but it isn't a bad idea to keep it around as an electronic document. Now, you can download it at this URL, or if you don't want to remember this URL, just sign on to the National Association of State Boards of Accounting, which is NASBA.org, and then you can put in the subject matter, the CPA Candidate Bulletin, or you can use this URL. Also, I have a downloaded copy of the Candidate Bulletin in all my in most of the MAcc courses, and they would include MAcc 510, MAcc 520, 530, MAcc 540, and MAcc 570. So you can find them under other CPA materials towards the bottom left-hand corner of the classroom. Now, when you're going to apply for the exam, one of the things you have to basically is determine where you want to sit for the exam and also where you want to obtain your license as a CPA. And in the CPA exam, if you look at the candidate bulletin, they don't use the word states, they use jurisdictions, because the exam is given in 55 jurisdictions, and as I recall, there are 50 states, which means there are 5 additional jurisdictions where the exam is given, such as Guam or Puerto Rico. Now, there's a reason for this. Because we do call it the Uniform CPA exam, and that is true. In order to become a CPA, you do have to pass the Uniform CPA exam in all jurisdictions. However, every jurisdiction has its own methodology or its own process for screening candidates, for determining how many credit hours, what type of experience you need to be a CPA, and so forth. So it can vary the requirements can vary from jurisdiction to jurisdiction. Then you want to apply to sit for the exam, and you go to the jurisdiction. Again, you can find that on the NASBA site, the National Accounting State Board, the National Association of State Boards of Accounting. And you can then go ahead and verify the eligibility requirements for both the sitting for the CPA exam and also being licensed. That can vary by jurisdiction. For example, in Pennsylvania, in order to sit for the exam, you're required to have 120 hours plus a certain amount of accounting and business hours, but you're required to have 120 upper level, or if you will, college accounting hours. In Ohio, on the other hand, right on the western border of Pennsylvania, the state of Ohio requires 150 hours to sit for the exam. So you can see these requirements can vary by state. So you don't want to start applying for a jurisdiction that will not necessarily accept you to sit for the exam, or that eventually will, for whatever reason, would not license you. So again, verify your eligibility requirements. And then what you're going to want to do is 30 out of the 50 jurisdictions have the ability to allow you to apply, complete an application online. Now, Pennsylvania is one of those jurisdictions. And if you want to find out what state boards of accountancy do allow online applications, you can go to this URL, the nasba.org/exams/CPA exam. Otherwise, if you're going to apply for a jurisdiction that does not require online, the NASBA site also has the alternative means for you to contact. They'll basically tell you how to contact the individual jurisdictional boards regarding your application. Okay, now part of the application process is not only online application, but you're also going to have to submit not only your online application, but materials, other application materials, and of course, fees. And this is a summary for Pennsylvania, not every state. This is for this state of Pennsylvania. These are the application materials that have to be submitted. Number one, we have to submit the online application and the fees. All these are fees. Okay, that's online. We also have to submit official transcripts of all of our upper level education, and the transcripts must be directly mailed to what we call the CPA Examination Services, CPAES, and it has to be mailed by the transcript authority. Also, we have to mail in a character reference form submitted by the candidate. Again, this can be submitted personally by the candidate to CAPES. And we also have to submit a Social Security number certification form, again submitted by the candidate to CAPES. Now again, depending upon the state that you're working through, these application requirements may differ. Again, they can differ from state to state. Now, here's the other thing that you have to be slightly careful with, and that's all these items outside of the online application have to be submitted to the CPAES, the CPA Examination Services. So it has to be forwarded to the Services Authority, one by the colleges that are going to send the transcripts, and then the character reference and the Social Security forms have to be sent via yourself. Now, all these forms must be received by CPAES within 45 days of the application submission, or there's a chance, and a fairly good chance, that they're going to the application itself will become what they call inactive, and any information that has been sent in that is associated with it will be destroyed because of privacy concerns. So you want to make sure all that information is submitted within is going to be submitted within that 45 days. And the answer, by the way, again, is if your application becomes inactive because of that 45-day rule, there is no refund of fees. You forfeit the fees that you paid submitting the online application. Now, according to the NASBA website at this point in time, after the receipt of all documents, it's going to take 6 to 8 weeks to process and approve your application. That's when all that information above is forwarded into and it's received by CPAES. So at this point in time, they're saying due to the high volume of information that they're receiving, it takes 6 to 8 weeks. My guess, it can probably take a little bit less than that, but just so you know, it can be a lengthy process. Okay, now after the application approval, you will receive what is called an NTS, or a notice to schedule. That is the official document that authorizes you to sit for the prescribed portion of the CPA exam to which you applied for. Now, NTSs, notice the schedules, also have shelf lives. They have expiration dates. And by the way, if you apply and if you apply and you let your NTS expire, there is no refund in fees. Okay, so most states, and then again, the NTS varies by state. In the case, most states, it's 6 months. Pennsylvania is 6 months. California, Hawaii, Louisiana, and Utah, it's 9 months. In North Dakota, South Dakota, and Virginia, it's 12 months. And in Texas, which is probably no, not probably, undoubtedly the toughest board of accountancy in the United States, it's 90 days. So again, keep that in mind. Your notice to schedule also has a shelf life. Okay, with that then is you can use your notice to schedule, and you can then submit a request to the Prometric Testing Center on your preferred date, day, and time. And again, the sooner you do this, is it's kind of like the best slots fill up first. So the longer you wait, the less likely you are going to get this the particular day or time or date that you want. The Prometric testing centers, there's several around Philadelphia. You select the testing center that you want to go to, and again, Prometric testing centers are not only in Pennsylvania, they're in other parts of the country. So wherever you're applying, there's a Prometric testing center, but you have to select the date and the time. And this becomes, at this point in time, this is the date that you are committing to. I'm committing to taking the exam at this center on this date and at this time. Okay, now let's take a look or start from our previous slides before the application process where we talked about your next steps. Again, let's assume that we're going to set the CPA exam date after we've done our application process. And I'm going to set it. And I'm just going to pick a date. And it's going to be October the 3rd, 2017. So between the end of my MAcc course and October 3rd, 2017, I've committed, basically that's going to be the date I take the exam. Again, what you don't want to do is once the course is over, you do not want to stop practicing because you're going to try to cram for that information but towards the end of October, and you're not going to be able to do it. So you need to go then and use one of the probably the coolest tool that Surgeon CPA Review has, and it's called adaptive learning. This is the phase that after the end of your MAcc course, you go into what we call an adaptive learning phase that is provided through, again, Surgeon CPA Review. And you're going to be in that adaptive learning phase right up to the point where you're going to take the CPA exam on October the 3rd. Now, let's talk about how this adaptive learning works, and it's really a pretty cool process. You're going to go through a number of different study steps during the adaptive learning period, and the interesting thing is that Surgeon will do all of this for you. The first thing you're going to go through is what we call an assessment phase. Now, the good thing is that you've already done enough questions in your MAcc courses, the applicable MAcc courses, that basically now the system itself, the Surgeon software already knows a lot about you. It knows what your strengths are. It knows what your weaknesses are. So in the assessment phase, again, which we've already gone through, the system learns about your strengths and weaknesses. Then you go into the second phase, which is where you will start in the adaptive phase, and it's called the study phase. And it's based upon your performance. In our course, the MAcc courses, the Surgeon software is going to tailor an individual study plan to focus you on the practice questions and the topic areas that you need extra help in. It'll even refer you to the videos and the text references you need to concentrate on. The result, you end up studying and practicing on what you don't know or what you're having trouble with. It's not going to pay a lot of attention to the stuff that you don't have trouble with because you've already got that down, but it will pay attention to the stuff that you need to brush up on. After you go through the study phase, and again, the study phase, the length of the study phase is determined automatically by the adaptive learning software within Surgent. Then you go into what they call the study and simulation phase. So when the Surgent software determines that you've mastered the study phase, it's going to automatically add simulation questions to your study plan. So automatically then it will start you into a new phase that will include more multiple choice questions and also simulations. And the last phase then is what we call the practice phase. As your test date, October the 3rd in this case, starts nearing, the Surgent software will focus on practice exams or types of practice exams to help you increase your chances of passing the CPA exam, that section. And it will actually notify you when it feels you're ready to sit for the exam. So what you can see is between the end of your MAcc course and your exam date, you don't stop working. You go into the Surgent adaptive learning phase, and what it's going to do is it's going to concentrate more of what you don't know versus what you do know, and that's going to make your studying and practice much more efficient. Yeah, we just talked about the Surgent adaptive learning process, and now we're going to see how to actually utilize the adaptive learning process, and it's a lot easier than you think. What you see here is the typical Surgent landing page. At the top you have your introduction, and they call them Surgent cards at the top. Then you have your various categories here, and you did your selection from the categories on the bottom middle section, and then you had simulations down on the very bottom left hand section. You also have some other materials on the right which you haven't used yet, and we'll talk about those in a few minutes. What we want to do right now is concentrate on are those top three cards. So I've now made the section, I've expanded the section so it's a little bit easier to read. But in order to invoke or start utilizing the adaptive study features of Surgent is I simply go to my study section card where it says start a question or a question practice session. That immediately, when I click on that, and I can either select 10 questions, 30 questions, or 50 questions, when I do that, the system will, based upon what it is assessed, what I know and what I don't know, it will then start asking me questions about areas where I need additional work in. It's also going to provide me the videos that I'm going to need to review regarding those areas where I need additional work under the BEC section. And then thirdly, it's going to suggest reading references out of the Surgent textbook regarding the information where I need to have some extra work. Now you'll notice again over on the left-hand side where I say study session, all I have to do is pick one of those three items and I'm automatically into adaptive study. Now I can click on 10 items, 30 items, or 50 items. It doesn't really matter. Let's assume right now I clicked on 10. I click on 10 questions. So the next item I do, let's say I do just a couple of questions out of those 10 questions, and I decide to basically suspend my study section. And again, if you looked at the, I can say exit the study session in another screen. So what I'd get then is when I come back to my Surgent screens, what I'm going to have here now is I'm going to have three cards again, and you can see here is now it's allowing me, okay, it says, do you want to resume that study session? And do you want to resume the questions? Do you want to continue on with the questions since I suspended them? Or do you want to close that study session? Or do you want to review everything I've done in that study session? Those, like if they're 10 questions. So what that's also telling you is that if you say, okay, you know what, I really only want to do 5 questions, not 10 questions, or I want to do 20 questions, not 30 questions, you can basically close out the study session and basically customize the number of questions you want to do. Now that's your pause section that you're working on. Now, Surgeon also says, do you want to start another study section? And again, this will be part of your adaptive learning technology where the system will assess how well you've done on your questions to date, and based upon where it feels you need the work, you'll get additional questions. And also, now it's asking you, now you want to review the session on manufacturing overhead, and that happens to be a 24-minute video section. Now let's take a look and see how we create our study plan and timing for the study plan. Okay, again, what we see here on the slide is a partial display of the Surgeon landing page for BEC with the cards at the top and the other information below. What we're going to do is take a look at over here in the mid section on the right hand side, this little pencil that I've just highlighted with the red circle. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to help establish my study plan and timing based upon the input that I'm going to now enter when I click on this this little pencil that is circled by the icon. Okay, now again, we go back to the end of the MAcc course, then we know we're going to use adaptive learning in the meantime between the end of the MAcc course and the CPA exam date. I've got to set that CPA exam date. So let's assume right now that I'm going to use the date of October the 4th. So I select that date, and in my first screen after I get that pencil, what I put in is the entry the date that I plan to take the exam, and that'll be October the 4th of 2017. And based upon the date that I had originally set this information up, it's telling me I have 58 days until the exam. So there's a clock countdown now. So now I click the next key, and it asks me select the days of the week you plan on studying. And in this case, I selected Monday, Wednesday, and Saturday. Those are going to be my 3 days that I'm going to study every week until the exam. So I've given the information now, the amount of days that I plan to study, 3 days in a week, and my exam is in less than 60 days. Okay, then the next item after that, now that we've input the date that we're going to take the exam, and we've also put in the dates that we plan to study, now the system can create a study plan for us based upon what it knows about our strengths and weaknesses, the time to the exam date, and the time we are committing to studying. Now, all that information is located actually over on this right-hand side. We haven't used this before, so this will be brand new information. You can see there's a schedule at the top giving us certain information. Then there's a second schedule beneath it with the bar graphs and some other type of diagrams. We'll go over both of these areas just so you're familiar with them. So again, based upon what it knows about us, as how we've done, how well we've done in what sections and so forth, based upon how many days towards the exam that we have to the exam, and based upon how many days we plan on studying, now it's going to produce a study plan for us. And in this case, we can see the beginning of the study plan. And to help you interpret this a little, this says we did 165 out of 1,408 questions. And what this is basically telling us at the top is that we've completed the assessment phase, which you have already completed. That means after we've done the assessment phase, we go into the study phase, and that's what we're talking about here. Study status, we're in the study phase. Also, this is telling us the number of study sessions that we've gone through. In this case, our first study session. This represents the total amount of time we spent on the multiple choice questions. This represents, the 58 represents the number of days until we take the exam. 45% in this case represents our trending score. And the 30 minutes represents the suggested amount of study time that we should be taking per day in studying our practice questions and then going through our simulations when we have to do that. Now, the number here is dependent upon how well you've been doing, how well you are doing in addressing the questions that you were having trouble with. Plus, it also understands how many days it's going to take, or how many days do we have left until we do the exam. So it takes all these factors into consideration, and it adjusts your time, the amount of minutes that you need to study. It may adjust it up, it may adjust it down. I'm a little surprised it's as low as 30 minutes in this particular case. But what it's stating here is you need to spend 30 minutes, 3 days a week going over these study questions. And again, don't be surprised as these intervals change from, I won't say minute to minute, but from very frequently. Now, the other item that we need to look at is basically the course progression. At the top here, we show our total study schedule. We said Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. And it talks about our progress, okay? And this basically is our assessment, and that's complete. Now we're in basically our study sessions where we have our video lectures, our study sessions, our practice MCQs, and also reviewing reading material. Okay, then when we graduate from in progress, then we'll go on to study and simulations, where we'll continue. Now this particular box over here will now say not just study, it'll say study plus simulations, and we'll be being given multiple choice questions and also simulations. Then as we head towards the end, towards when we're actually going to take the exam, it's going to shift into the exam practice session. So with that gives you an idea of the adaptive study, and believe me, it's an amazing concept. And it will increase your, if you use the adaptive study between the time that you have, between the time you've completed your course and take the exam, you will have increased your potential for passing that section of the exam considerably. So again, thank you for your time.